guys, today is a short video, just more practice on now working with numbers through the thousandths. So we're working with numbers that are decimals. We have the decimal and these digits that come to the right of it. And I did a short video, if you haven't watched it yet, which helps you identify what the values are based on what place value it's sitting in. And so today we're actually going to work with a number and identify the value of a single digit. So here we go. Let's say I have the number 3 and 209 thousandths. So remember that in our place value chart, it's important to understand the chart. If you know what the value names are in each parking spot of a place value chart, this should be easy cheesy. So this is the ones place, this is the tenths, this is the hundredths, and this is the thousandths. So let's go ahead and identify what that looks like, right? So ones place, it's just one. Hundredths. So when you think hundred, you think like this, right? Hundredths. But remember when we're working with anything to the right of a decimal, we can represent it with the value as a fraction. And I'll go over that in just a second. Thousandths would be 1,000. And tenths would be anything over 10, okay? So let me show you what that means. So what if I want to know the value of each of these digits? So remember, there's a couple tricks. The first trick is you can cover up all the other digits you're not working with and make them a 0, and then just identify what you're left with. The other thing you can do is use multiplication to figure out the value. Take the digit that you're identifying the value of, multiply it by the place value it is in. Remember place value. What place is it in and how much is it worth? This is worth 1 whole. This is worth tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Now, the reason we write it over a fraction is because of the value of it. It's a very, very fraction of a whole, okay? It's a smaller number. So let's do the 3. The 3 is in the ones place, and 3 times 1 is 3, so the value of this 3 is 3. The 2. The 2 is sitting in the tenths place, so we say it's worth 2 tenths. Now I hope that helps you if you have worked with fractions before. If I was to read this fraction out loud, I would say this is 2 tenths. The fraction is 2 tenths. Yes, it can simplify, but we're not simplifying right now. All we're doing is identifying the value of a digit based on where it's sitting in the number according to a place value chart. So the 2 is worth 2 tenths. The 0, even though it's a 0, it's still sitting as a value in the hundredths place, so it's 0 hundredths. And this 9 is sitting in the thousandths place, so the value is 9 thousandths. And again, we write these as fractions. Now, do you notice the difference of how we wrote the value? Everything to the right of the decimal, the 2, the 0, and the 9, they're always going to be written as fractions when you write down what the value is. If you're working with anything to the left of the decimal, they are whole numbers. So let's do another example. What if I had 78 and 28 hundredths? Okay. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll ask you to compare the value of the same digit. So notice I have an 8 and an 8. I want you to think first before we begin. Do you think you would know which 8 is worth more? Because remember, each of these digits has a value based on what place it's sitting in according to the chart. One of them is going to be bigger than the other. If you can identify the value of both of these 8s, you'll be able to figure out which one's bigger, which one's smaller. So let's go ahead and identify our place value chart. So this is in the hundreds. This is in the ones. Oh, and I'm sorry, that's not hundreds. So the 7 is in the tens. The 8 is in the ones. Then we have our decimal. So now things change. We start to say tenths, hundredths, thousandths, because it's a smaller digit. And so we have, or it's a smaller value. So we have the tenths, and then we have the hundredths, and that's it for this example. Now if I said this number properly, remember that we say it's like we have 78.28, but that's not proper math lingo. That's not how we say it. So remember we say 78 and 28 hundredths, okay? So you have to add on, when you have a decimal, you have to add on that lingo, that vocabulary of the place it's in when you're working with any number to the right of a decimal. If I didn't have that, it would just be 78. Notice I don't say 78 ones. It's not how we do that. But if I have a decimal, I'm going to say 78 and 28 hundredths. Okay, you have to add that on. So let's figure out the value of this 8 and this 8 and then compare it. This 8 is sitting in the ones place. So I can say 8 times 1 is 8. So there's the value of that one. 8 is the same thing as 8.0 or 8.00, but it's 8 whole ones. Okay. This 8 is very different. It's to the right of the decimal, and as we move down the place value chart, as we move down to the right, each digit's value is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, okay? And I'll show you a little bit why that is. So this 8 is sitting in the hundredths. I don't want to know the value of the 28. Remember, we're just comparing the value of the 8s. This 8 is sitting in the hundredths. So 100 should give you a hint. There's going to be 100. But remember, it's to the right of the decimal, so we start to write them as fractions. And here's why. This value of this digit is considered an 8 out of 100. Imagine you have a pizza and it's 100 slices and I only eat 8 of them. That's a very small amount, right? And so this 8, the value of it is really small. It's 8 out of 100, so it's 8 hundredths. And so fractions obviously are smaller than whole numbers, so that is why we write this as a fraction to help us understand. This 8 is sitting in the hundredths place. We're going to write the value as 8 out of 100. So now I have a whole number 8, and now I have 8 out of 100. Well, I could rewrite this as a decimal. It would be 0.08. Because remember, the other trick to find the value is you can just cover up all the other numbers with zeros. So I would have 0.08. So now let's see if we can compare that. 8 is what compared to 0.08? And let's say that properly. 8 is what compared to 8 hundredths? Now remember, I'm not saying 8 is compared to what to 8 is compared to what to as, I'm not saying 8 hundredths. I am saying 8 hundredths. That's a very different number. It's not 8 hundredths. It's not bigger. Remember, decimals are small. They're like, it's like you take a quarter and you take a penny out of it. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller, okay? So if I have 8 out of 100, it's the same thing as 8 of hundredths. And this is 8 wholes. I don't even have one whole. I have a 0 here. I don't even have a whole anything. I don't have a whole pizza. I have 8 of 100 slices, okay? So I hope that's helping you understand that it's very, very small. So when we compare numbers, you can only compare digits that are sitting in the same spot. This is in the ones place, and technically right here, I have a 0 in the ones place, right? So the 8 and the 0. Remember, I'm not going to say this is bigger because it has an 8 and 2 zeros, and this one has an 8 and 2 zeros. I'm not going to say they're equal. The only thing that is going to help you do this the right way is going digit by digit that are sitting in the same spot. That's the most important part. You can only compare parking spots that are the same. This is in the ones, this is in the ones. This is worth 8, this is worth 0. Which is bigger? The 8 is. Remember, the alligator wants to eat the bigger number. So if I read this left to right, you always compare left to right. You have to say this is what compared to this. Well, 8 is bigger compared to 8 hundredths. Okay? So I hope that helps you guys. Get some more practice. Rewatch this if you have to, and I'll post some more practice for you guys as well. Thanks so much.